Hello, friends, and welcome to the PrepWell podcast. I'm your host, Phil Black. And if you have an 8th, 9th, or 10th grader with big aspirations, like the Ivy League, or military service academies like West Point, ROTC, or athletic scholarships, boom, you've come to the right place. My specialty, my superpower, if you will, is preparing families for these competitive programs. I'll teach you what your child should do, when they should do it, and how you can help. So stick around and prepare to out-prepare. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the PrepWell podcast. At the beginning of each episode, I usually try to give you a heads up on what we'll be talking about so that you can decide whether or not it's worth investing your time. So let me give you an idea of who should stick around for today's episode. Today's topic is a very narrow one for a very select group of students. And for this reason, it will likely not be one of my most downloaded episodes, but I don't care about that. I don't care about the stats. What I care about in this episode is trying to reach the few students out there who have a lot of potential and have put themselves in a position to be very successful, but who are on the brink of throwing it all away if there isn't an intervention. Specifically, I'm speaking to juniors in high school, but I'm not talking about any junior. I'm talking to juniors who have performed very well up until now, even under the trying conditions of COVID and lockdowns and school closures, and who want to close the deal over the next 9 months. And by close the deal, I mean get into Cornell, or get into that service academy, or get recruited for their sport, or get an early interest letter from Harvard or Stanford or USC, or get an ROTC scholarship. They want to finish high school strong. I'm talking to juniors who want to be special, who want to do something with their lives, and who believe that high school is their launch pad. And certainly this does not include every junior out there listening. I would say, and I would hope, that the majority of my online and private PrepWellers do fall into this category, but I know this podcast gets listened to by non-PrepWellers as well, so it's probably not suited for everyone, and that's fine. I'm not here to judge anyone. If you aren't motivated and you just want to cruise along and not worry that much about college, and you'd rather fire up that PS4 and grab a Bang energy drink and hang out and swipe on your phone for hours at a time and assume that everything's going to work out, great, go for it. You're actually in the majority. If this describes you, Mazel tov. But this episode is not for you. So feel free to stop the podcast and have a great day. If you're a parent, especially a parent of a junior, or you're a parent who's just curious about what I have to say to this very unique cohort of students at this time and place, which I have a lot of experience with, both personally and professionally, then stick around. But my words are not meant for you. They're meant for the students, your children. The minority of students who want to, or claim they want to, crush high school and get into the college of their dreams. Or if not their dream school, then at least have a handful of great options when all is said and done. So let's pause for a second and let everyone decide whether or not they want to continue down this road. Because I will say up front that this may not be a comfortable podcast for some. I may say things that you disagree with, maybe vehemently. You may hear things that upset you. You may hear things that you know are true deep down, but no one has had the balls to tell you, including me up until today. So if you're sensitive or you're not open to feedback, take the day off. You have my permission. Go back to swiping and watching endless TikTok videos. I'm sure everything will be just fine. So now is the time to hit that stop button if you're not interested. I'll even give you a countdown. 3, 2, 1, bye-bye. Okay, if you're still listening, then let's get to work. The first thing I want to do is give my quick assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on your fellow high schoolers over the last few years, because the impact has not been distributed evenly among freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Remember, COVID began shutting things down in March of 2020. So let's get in the go back machine and look at how this impacted the different grades. Let's start with the then senior class in March of 2020. This is the class of 2020. Yes, COVID sucked for them because they missed the last few months of their senior year and prom and spring sports and all of the farewell traditions. Fair enough. In terms of college preparation, however, they were already over the hump. They had already applied and been accepted to college and were in the process of deciding where to go. So it was bad, but it was manageable. How about the then junior class, the class of 2021? My twin sons happen to be in this cohort, so I know it well. First off, it was horrible for the juniors who had not yet taken an SAT or an ACT by March, because it left them in limbo and unsure of where they stacked up in the college admissions process. Now, colleges tried to relieve some of that pressure by going test optional, but all that did was bring with it a whole host of unintended consequences, including making it nearly impossible to get into the more selective colleges. This is when we saw applications skyrocket, and colleges like Harvard and Yale and MIT saw their acceptance rates drop to the low single digits, 3%, 4%. So obviously, this was no picnic for them either. But at least these juniors had completed the large majority of their high school career before the pandemic hit, and they could represent those records on their applications. Now, what about the then sophomore class, the class of 2022? These students got it really bad. Why? Because they lost their entire junior year. Junior year is when most students really get to strut their stuff. It's when they take their hardest classes. It's when they prove that their grades are on an upward trajectory. They take leadership roles. They really make things happen. And that was all taken away. So this class got it good and hard. And finally, what about your class? The then freshman class, the class of 2023. This is the class that I'm focusing on today. This is your class if you're a junior right now. Your class and you got jacked, but in a different way from the other classes. Let me explain. Part of the reason, from my observations, that some of you might not be performing as well as you'd like to be right now as juniors, or as you expected to be, whether in school or on the SAT or ACT, is due to the timing of the shutdowns. The shutdown hit your class toward the end of your freshman year. Well, why is this significant? Because many of you never really learned how to learn. Many of you never really learned how to work hard, especially academically. Many of you never really had the chance to figure out high school and what it takes to excel, because you only made it through 6 or 7 months of freshman year before the shutdown started. And 6 to 7 months of freshman year will not teach you what you need to know to be a successful high school student through senior year. What you missed, which was much more significant than a few months of your freshman year, was your entire sophomore year, what I call your setup year. If you're a PrepWeller, either in my online program or one of my private students, or you listen to this podcast regularly, you know how crazy I am about sophomore year. It's a pivotal year. It's the golden year. The year where you establish and solidify your study habits. You learn how to take notes. You learn how to study, how to interact with teachers, how to muscle through annoying group projects, how to manage your time, how to bounce back from a bad exam, how to write a viable essay. All of that was lost an entire year. Your setup year never happened. This is no joke and may have long-lasting ramifications if you don't take control of your life, like right now. Because now you're being thrown directly into the belly of the beast, right into junior year. And in my opinion, many of you are not prepared for it, at least not yet. Now, obviously, you survived sophomore year, even though it's probably a blur to you right now. But what did you do? What did you learn while at home for an entire year? The most important year of all, academically, in terms of setting yourself up for success, in terms of building the habits that you'll need going forward? Be honest. Did you take last year seriously? Many of you, I would guess, logged into a Zoom class, sat on your bed, pretended to pay attention while swiping on your phone and playing video games and eating and lounging and drinking and napping and sleeping. And I shudder to think of what else you did. And by the way, probably getting straight A's for your trouble. Because every test was open book, you had every resource at your fingertips. Students were, quote, collaborating with each other, wink, wink. Teachers were barely grading exams. Assignments were never considered late. And the teachers didn't want to make you feel bad. And some of the teachers had no idea what they were doing with remote teaching. So everyone got A's. You get an A, and you get an A, and you get an A, and by the way, you get an A, and there's an A for you. Congratulations. Unfortunately, that charade is over. And for some of you, reality is setting in, or will be setting in sometime soon. Now you're juniors, and you're back in class, and expectations are back where they were in 2019 and 2020. Unfortunately, for some of you, unknowingly maybe, your work ethic and study habits might still be stuck in sophomore year. And those study habits might suck. If this doesn't describe you, and you were able to overcome these circumstances as a 14 or 15-year-old, then this doesn't apply to you. I would consider you an outlier and a stud. But if what I'm saying rings true, and that you got caught in this trap, then it's time to listen up. And I don't want to get into who's to blame for this. Certainly there's a lot of blame to go around, and you should shoulder some of that blame too if you took the easy road. But let's get beyond the blame game and focus on what to do right now. And by the way, the reason I'm bringing this topic up is because I have seen and heard and witnessed a lot of this behavior, particularly with juniors, because I work with a lot of juniors. I talk to a lot of juniors. I have a son who is a junior. I have two sons who were juniors 2 years ago. And I talk to a lot of parents of juniors. And what really prompted this topic was a recent conversation I had with one of my older sons. He's a freshman at Yale. And when I talked to him the other day, he's only been there for 3 weeks, he seemed particularly relaxed and happy. And he was on the phone and he was relating to me what he had planned for his afternoon and evening. And here's what he was up to. Office hours with his physics teacher for an hour, then off to dinner with his friends for an hour, then to club swim team practice for an hour, then to ballroom dancing for an hour, and then to club water polo for an hour and a half. And hopefully, time permitting, he would get back to his dorm room and do a little bit of homework before it got too late. And I couldn't help but think to myself, wow, this kid's got the life. Sign me up. That sounds like quite the schedule for a random Tuesday on week 3 of school. And I told him how great that sounded and that he deserved it, that he had put in his time and that now he was reaping the rewards. And that was true. And when I think back to what life was like when he was a junior in high school, this was just before the pandemic, I recall that I almost never saw him during his entire junior year. This was a given back in the day. I literally went for weeks, it seemed, without ever seeing him. Because when he wasn't at a 6 a.m. water polo practice or a mock trial or a speech and debate tournament, he was grinding in his room. He was sitting at his desk, not on his bed swiping on his phone. He was sitting at his desk with his phone turned off and outside of his room, and a book in front of him, and a notebook there, and a pen in his hand. Grinding, learning, studying, writing, solving for 9 months. That's the way it used to be. This was standard practice for high-performing students. And part of the reason he did that is because he learned how to do it during his sophomore year, because he was challenged academically during that year, and he had to respond. He would either rise to the challenge or default to being average. and he decided to meet the challenge. And of course, he watched and listened to all of his PrepWell Academy videos, where I harp on these study habits every week during freshman and sophomore year. And he took these important lessons with him into junior year, and he grinded. Thankfully for him, he didn't have to spend his sophomore year sitting on his bed, faking interest in a Zoom class, while swiping endlessly on his phone. He got in right under the wire. And so he deserves everything that he's getting because he put in the work. So all of you juniors out there, if you expect to reap similar rewards, whether at a highly selective school or a service academy or as a college athlete, you better be grinding this year. Junior year is the year of the grind, even under the best of circumstances. So if COVID threw you for a loop last year and you missed out on a lot and you got into some bad habits, you better get into super grind mode because some of you have a lot of catching up to do. If you're a junior and you have a target SAT or ACT score that's going to get you where you want to go, you better be grinding. If you're a junior and you need to show an upward trend in your grades, you better be grinding. If you're a junior and you've never taken an AP class or multiple AP classes before, you better be grinding. If you're a junior and you're expecting to get 2 glowing letters of recommendation for your college application, you better be grinding. And I'm not going to apologize for delivering this news. I know there may be some juniors out there and parents of juniors who consider this message too stressful or too hardcore or strict or not balanced enough. You may be right. I don't have all the answers. I'm just going by what works for students who have big aspirations and who are willing to put in the work to get there. Remember, if you don't want to be special, if you don't have big goals that you're working toward, you should have turned this podcast off 10 minutes ago. If working this hard doesn't sit well with you, then opt out. No harm, no foul. No one's forcing you to do anything. But if you do so, you opt out. You just can't expect to reap the rewards that many of the grinders will reap. And that's okay too. Just don't be surprised. If you're not willing to put in the time, if you're not willing to meet your teachers after school to develop strong relationships, if you're not willing to set up an appointment to meet your new guidance counselor whom you've never met, if you're not willing to teach yourself extra SAT or ACT math topics, if you're not willing to watch extra Khan Academy videos on physics, if you're not willing to take multiple 3-hour practice SAT and ACT exams before you take the real thing, if you're not willing to pause your relationship with your girlfriend or boyfriend for 9 months, if you're not willing to put the PS4 up in the rafters for 9 months, if you're not willing to do extra work on a group project to make sure that group gets a good grade, if you're not willing to get off your bed and sit at a desk to study with a pen and a notebook sitting next to you, if you're not willing to get off your fucking phone from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., Monday to Friday, if you're not willing to leave your phone in a different room from where you're studying so you aren't distracted by every notification, ding, alert, and asinine comment from your friends, if you're not willing to do these things for the next 9 months, you don't deserve to be special. You don't deserve to reap the rewards. It's that simple. If you're not willing to do these things, you deserve to be like everybody else, average. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If your parents have to give you a curfew on a Friday night, you don't deserve it. If you need your mother to badger you to study for the ACT, you don't deserve it. If you can't put down that phone, you don't deserve it. If you can't muster the discipline to grind for 9 months, you don't deserve it. As much as you think you might deserve it, you don't. And I'm here to remind you, before it's too late, and before you throw in the towel because this sounds too hard, that the grind that I speak of, that legions of high-performing students have done before you, doesn't last forever. That's the dirty little secret. It's a 9-month push, September to June. Once you get over that 9 months, if you do it right, you will have set yourself up for success. You will have set yourself up for life in many cases. Do you have 9 months in you? My son at Yale, who I talked to on the phone, who's taking ballroom dancing lessons on a random Tuesday night before water polo practice, he's no longer grinding. He's living large, and he deserves it. What will you deserve 9 months from now? That's all I've got for you today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the continued support. If you know a student in particular, an 11th grade student, or a parent of an 11th grade student, please share this episode with them. You can do that by finding that small box with the tiny arrow pointing up. That's the share button. Click that button, text your friends the link to this episode with a little personal note from you recommending that they give it a listen. If you have questions, comments, or an idea for an upcoming episode, please reach out to me by email, DM me on Instagram, PrepWell_Academy. Check out our blog, Facebook, connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. Until next week, goodbye, good luck, and never stop preparing. This podcast is brought to you by PrepWell Academy. PrepWell Academy is my one-of-a-kind online mentoring program that delivers to your 9th or 10th grader a short, highly relevant video from me every week, every Sunday in fact, where I give them a heads up about what they should be thinking about to stay ahead of the game. To get these valuable lessons into your child's hands, please head over to PrepWellAcademy.com and enroll your child today.